Good morning, everyone. I just want to make sure my mic is working so I can hear myself and you're nodding. I appreciate it's very confusing when the first introduction is by Rob and then another Rob comes on. So it's a little bit strange. I'm just seeing my slides are getting ready. Are they ready yet? Almost. Nearly ready. That's fine. So I can tell a little story. I work for a company called Klaviyo, okay? You might have seen they're like one of the headline sponsors here. The very first thing when we actually start working at Klaviyo is we learn how to pronounce Klaviyo. I guarantee if any of you read it, you will all go, Klaviyo? You work for Klaviyo? I'm like, no, it's Klaviyo. So we have T-shirts with the phonetical spelling of Klaviyo when we actually start working. So I don't know, there is a lovely story behind it, but I'm not going to go into that today because it looks like my slides are ready and they're going to appear. There you go, Klaviyo, okay? So, good morning. I'm Rob Boland. I'm a solution architect at Klaviyo. And I came up from London last night on the train to be here bright and early this morning. And as I was on the train, I was like, it's 7:30 on a Friday. There's people. The train from London to Manchester at that time is full of stags and hens. Everyone's having a great time. A few tinnies, a bit of journey juice. And I was like, I'm going to work tomorrow. And I was reading through my contract. And I was like, nowhere in here does it say I'm meant to work on Saturdays for Klaviyo. Like nowhere. It says Monday to Friday. So this morning, I got up and I emailed HR. And I emailed HR and I said, hey, HR, just wondering, do I get paid extra or overtime for like talking about Klaviyo on Saturday? Instant response. Out of office. Our working hours are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So I can actually talk about whatever I want today, which is great. So I'm going to talk about the year 1989, okay? Before Klaviyo existed, before I existed, okay? And for those of you who weren't around in 1989, this is what a selfie looked like in 1989, okay? Just to give you context of the time era that we're in, okay? Now, 1989 is a very important time, okay? Because the internet had a problem. And it was actually a really big problem. Some of you in this room probably know it better than I do. But I'm going to just try and explain it to you very simply. The internet works on a very fundamental principle where you have a router which sends information from one place to another, okay? So if I want to send a message from this side of the room to that side, the information goes through a router, okay? So it goes from point A to point B. If we expand that a little bit further, let's say I want to send a message from Manchester to London, it has to go through a series of different routers to get from point A to point B, because there's no direct cable connecting every computer to every other computer. It has to go through a series of different points, okay? Simple enough. But the problem is when you have a big distance to cover, okay? If you imagine, the world is massive. If I want to send information from Japan to America or London to Sydney, there is an awful lot of little hops between routers that has to happen. And the data has to figure out the shortest route to get there, and also get there without overloading the different routers at each point, okay? The problem in 1989 is the mathematical limit was 15 routers. So we actually couldn't hop through more than 15 different routers. And this was called, ironically, the Routing Information Protocol, or the RIP protocol, okay? And the problem was, when you got to router number 16, the internet actually broke, okay? This is what the internet looks like when it breaks. And you physically could not send more data further than 15 routers, otherwise they would get overloaded and the wires would all just get mixed up and bits and bytes start being dropped. And that's the equivalent of that video buffering earlier, where the data just can't get where it needs to go. Okay? So, in 1989, two engineers from Cisco were looking at this, and they're getting a bit nervous, and they're kind of saying, Cisco is an internet company, and the internet is meant to scale and grow. This is the whole magic of it, that everybody can be online at the same time, connected, sending data everywhere. And they were seeing this hard limit of 15 routers was starting to cause issues. It was starting to hold up everything. So, as every great engineer does, they said, let's go for lunch and think about it. And they were in Texas, so I'm being very stereotypical, and I'm saying they went for a burger, some fries, and a shake, okay, to their local diner. And they're probably having a bit of ketchup. You know, things get messy, real nice juicy burger. And they had to go and probably grab a bunch of napkins, okay? So picked up a bunch of napkins, cleaned up the mess. And then they had one of those eureka moments that we all get. It could be in the shower, could be on the train, could be having a burger. And they went, hold on, we've just figured out the solution for this internet buffering problem. And they started to scribble it down on these napkins that they had, okay? So imagine, this is not the actual napkin, but they were scribbling it down on these ketchup-stained napkins, and they actually came up with the solution to this problem with the routers, which is still in use today. The entire internet is powered by this today. It's called, unofficially, the 3 napkins protocol, because it was spread over 3 napkins, but it's now the Border Gateway Protocol. And this was it, rewritten. They went back to the office and put it on paper. That's the original backbone of the internet as we know today. It's still used by everything. So this got me thinking. It's like, how often have you picked up a piece of paper, or you've got the back of an envelope or a beer mat or a napkin and just scribbled down something and just had an idea, and you just wanted to write it down or draw it or try and illustrate something to someone? So I call these napkin ideas. I'm going to trademark that as soon as I'm finished here today. Napkin ideas. And I was like, what other ones exist? So we have the Border Gateway Protocol. UTF-8 character encoding. I say a lot of the developers here know what that is. That started, someone just doodled on the back of a napkin to try and figure that out. The Laffer curve, if there's any economics people in the room, that is basically a chart of government taxation to income. Winning fantasy football teams have probably been written down on the back of a napkin at some stage, as well as the winning lotto numbers, but I always throw them out. Plots to rule and take over the world, but most importantly, the amazing ideas you're going to get from today's event. Okay, they're probably going to be on a napkin somewhere after lunch. But how do we go from napkins, like pieces of paper and napkins, these ideas, how do we actually convert them into something tangible, okay? As code is taking over the world, napkin ideas generally end up as being something like a mobile app or a website, something like that. That's generally what we're trying to get. That's our end goal from these napkin ideas. But it's hard to do that, okay? Because typically we need to write code. So in today's world, if I have a napkin, this is what I do. I go to ChatGPT, I take a picture of the napkin, and I say, make a website, and that's it, job done. But no, we're not doing that, okay? AI isn't ruining the world just yet. We still have jobs. We still have work to do to make it perfect. So typically, I'm a developer just like you. I'll sit down, I'll open up Visual Studio Code, I'll start writing some code. And that's how we get to these napkin ideas to an actual real-life ship product. So I'm going to go through the steps, okay? Because it's not actually as simple as opening up your text editor. Because then you need to think, where am I going to deploy this code? Is it going to be on AWS? Is it going to be on Google Cloud? Is it going to be on one of these fantastic Magento hosting companies that we have here today? Where am I going to put it? Security. Do I have to lock it down? I might have API keys. I might have credentials that I need to encrypt. What if I need this code to run on a schedule? There's like so many different headaches. Do I use PHP Storm? Do I use Eclipse? Do I use Notepad++? What happens when it breaks? Who's going to tell me it's gone offline? And You're like, all I want to do is just build something. I hate this figuring out your development environments and having to build everything before you can write your first line of code. So I'm going to introduce you to someone called Nick. So this is Nick. Nick is in New York. He's a very happy fella, as you can probably tell from the picture. And he's in New York. And a few years ago, Nick said, I want to build a company. I want to get out of this working for someone else, and I want to build a company. And Nick and his friend, they started to basically spin up different software projects. Nick was a back-end developer, and his friend was a front-end developer. And then after a few months, Nick said, I'm sick of yak shaving. Yeah, nobody knows what that means. Yak shaving is donkey work. So Nick was sick of doing the donkey work, okay? For context, this is what a yak looks like, okay? So if someone ever asks you to shave a yak, say no. So Nick was constantly spinning up all this back-end infrastructure so that his friend could go and write a line of code and make something look pretty. And he was like, why do I have to keep doing this? He's like, it's taking me hours and days every time just to spin up some back-end servers or set up my development environment. So he said, I'm going to build a solution to this. Okay? So this is what Nick came up with. He calls it napkin.io. Okay? So napkin.io is a web browser where you just go and run your code in it. You open up your web browser, you go to napkin.io, and it is a pre-configured, ready-to-go development environment that supports Python and Node.js. Okay, so you can go and write your code. It's got all the infrastructure behind it. It's actually powered under the scenes by AWS, so it doesn't break. And it scales, and it grows, and handles all the capacity issues that you could ever have to think about. Out of the box, it has everything such as, how do I schedule? I want to schedule this code to run every minute, every hour, every day. If it breaks, it sends you an email. When it runs, it tells you. And you can pretty much deploy it as a webhook endpoint, so you can push data to it, and it will spin up on demand. Or you can schedule it to run on like a cron job, okay? So it's a really cool little nifty piece of kit. And as a solution architect, I'm constantly telling customers, hey, if you just had this little piece of code that takes data, transforms it, and puts it somewhere else, then we could do X. Like a perfect example of this recently is I had a customer in Germany. And in Germany, you cannot send any marketing material to people under the age of 16 by law. And they were like, we don't know how old our customers are. So what we did is we used Napkin to actually calculate, because we had a date of birth for everyone, but we didn't have the age. So we used Napkin to go take every date of birth, calculate it, and then save the actual age. And we do that every single year. So it's just that little piece of code that fills the gap. So we were like, this is great. This is really cool. And what happened next is Klaviyo went and we actually acquired Napkin. Because we said, this is solving so many problems for so many people. All my team were using this, unknown to most of management at Klaviyo. And one day we said, hey, you should look at this product. They got in touch with Nick. And a few months later, Nick now works at Klaviyo with us, where he's building Napkin into our entire product. So very quickly, a summary of what Napkin does. It lets you basically write an API or a function in your browser without having to spin up anything else. It is live straight away. It scales and grows just as you need it to. You don't have to worry about rate limits of capacity and things falling down. And you can share your code with each other as well. You can basically clone your functions to different Napkin accounts. So it's very nifty. And you can see here, we've called it Klaviyo code internally, okay? So we have, anyone who's used Klaviyo, we're a marketing automation tool. And we have built all these like drag and drops and drop-down menus and logical interfaces to let you build automated journeys. But we can't build every single thing. Developers will always rule because we can do whatever we need in custom code. And this is where we've got Napkin out to try and fill that gap so that marketers can use Klaviyo, but when they need to do something that little bit extra, gives developers an environment where they can quickly go, use their talents and their skills to actually write the code instead of having to worry about the maintenance of the development environment that's with it. So that's napkin.io. Feel free to go and have a look at it. It still will be available as a standalone product, okay? So that's the important thing is napkin.io is still there for you all to use as a separate thing. You don't need to be a Klaviyo customer. It's not exclusive to Klaviyo. There is a free plan as well, which will get you about 5,000 requests a month. So that's a completely free plan. And then the paid plan is a trivial $10 a month. So it's really very, very little for what it is, and lots of cool and exciting things coming with that. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for your time. If you want to remember who Klaviyo are, look in your tote bags, and you'll either have a very fetching pink hat or a slightly less exciting tanned color hat. So that's Klaviyo, okay? So I'm here for the rest of today. My colleague Jamie is here as well, up at the front row in the pink t-shirt. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day here.